welcome to the Tobago Heritage Festival webinar series 2021. Our theme this year is Resilient Tobago, remembering her roots with responsibility. Today we look at the early beginnings of this festival that now celebrates 34 years. Today I'm excited to share the webinar with some esteemed personalities who have contributed significantly to the development of Trinidad and Tobago and certainly stand out as icons of our nation. Let's welcome Mr. Stanley Beard, Mrs. Annette Alfred, Mr. Binley Benjamin, and Ms. Josanne Leonard. We will discuss the first 5 years or so of the festival. As some of you would know, festivals can be categorized in many ways, such as indigenous festivals, homegrown festivals, and tourist temple festivals. The Tobago Heritage is clearly one festival that captures all three. We will be discussing along the lines of the context of the festival, the background, the concept of the festival, the content of the festival, and certainly how we communicated that to the wider audiences. Why is it important for us to record and archive our history? It's because it holds our narratives, it maintains cultural traditions, informs the environment, records our ancestry, our heritage, perspectives, our pain, and our healing. For there to be continuity and a sense of history for us to move forward, performance has to exist beyond the borders of the stage. These are the words of Chloe Chotrani, famous dancer. So let's dive into our discussion at this time. And the first ball will be bowled to Mr. Stanley Beard.
Thank you, John, and pleasant good evening. John, the Tobago Heritage Festival, you can say, started in 1972. That's the year I left to go to school in Canada. And I landed up in the province of Manitoba, going to first the University of Winnipeg and then to the University of Manitoba. At 19, first time I was mixing in terms of cultures, my Tobago and Trinidad culture with the Canadian culture. And it happened in the city of Winnipeg. There is a festival still running today called Folklorama. My first experiences experiences in Folklorama, because what they did is that the whole content was built around the immigrants who came to Canada. So you had Ukrainian, Polish, Italian, Greek, whatever. And the festival there surrounded the different cultures, bringing the cultures together in the city every June, July. I recognize that I came from an island of the island of Tobago, pregnant with culture and history. So it's dawned upon me that what we could very well do is to develop a festival in which we celebrate our commonalities and our differences within the island of Tobago, and therefore have material for different locations around Tobago. I came back here in 1976 and basically started to work in Trinidad and Tobago. I entered the Tobago House of Assembly in 1984, and in 1986, I was made for the first time a full secretary in the Tobago House of Assembly with responsibility for environment, tourism. I worked before as an assistant secretary with Dr. J.D. Elder, who was the then secretary for culture. In 1986, being made the secretary for tourism, I had, and let me say it very openly, there was not really a department or division of tourism. We had an office, we had about 4 officers. Binley was one, Fitzroy Wright, Miss Applewhite, and Mr. Skeeter, I think. And what we did then, the Tobago House of Assembly did then, was assist the tourist board, the Trinidad and Tobago Tourist Board, to facilitate visitors and travel agents, etc., to Tobago. The responsibility, therefore, was on my shoulder at that time to develop the Tobago House of Assembly's first division of tourism, full division of tourism. And we sat and we shared the idea that we could actually introduce an integrated form of cultural tourism as the focus of developing tourism product for Tobago, to market Tobago, etc. And that's where the Tobago Heritage Festival, the concept which basically was in my head from 1972, that was born. It was birthed in that period. And what we did, we wrote a note, we submitted a note to the administrative committee of the House of Assembly, only to have that note deferred for 7 months. And as a youngster, you know, youngsters can get off the end at times. In the 7th month, I did raise a protest within the meeting, and the committee meeting agreed to the principle of developing the Heritage Festival, but they only assigned 1,000 Trinidad and Tobago dollars for us to engage in the trial year. Now, being a youngster back then and having been schooled, you never allow disappointments to get the better of you. I had one or two friends that I knew. Jocelyn Leonard was a radio personality, television personality, and a very good friend of mine from Manitoba days, Lynette Wilshire.
Yeah.
I called them and I told Bimby, let's take a trip to Trinidad to see if we can get support from the Trinidad, the Trinidad private sector towards raising funds to make sure that the Tobago culture and our rich heritage could be preserved and presented and become a tool to grow and expand our tourism offerings. That basically is how it developed. That's
Good.
the concept where it came from and how we were able to expand and have a successful trial year in 1987.
So tell me, Mr. Beard. Well, I think for this, I think I can call you Stanley. Um, um, what was the model used in terms of the committee? Was there like a special committee? Was it an ad hoc committee outside? Was it a combination of workers in the assembly? You know, give us a take on the model you used for that very first year.
The thing about it, John, the biggest concern we had at that time was ensuring that the replication of the island's history and culture was as authentic as we could get it. So we had to call on a diverse number of persons who would have had the expertise and the experience to be able to form the committee and to work. Dr. Elder, we asked him to be the main spine to ensure that whatever we put together was worthy of Tobago heritage and culture and that it was authentic. I remember going to um, uh, some of the programs and the types of things that we saw happening. Some people were willing to use plastic as plastic buckets and baskets in scenes on the beach, fishing scenes. We never had plastic buckets or baskets to collect the fish after the seine was pulled in. Right? You had either trays or whatever, wooden trays that were made by the carpenters. So you had to do that. And you saw a whole host of things. We had to make sure because we also saw a need to develop a product that we could sell to colleges and universities abroad. And at that time, we were also engaging one or two US colleges and Dutch colleges to actually record and present what we were unearthing, right? To actually have their students come in and work along with us in archaeology and such. So we had to be very mindful. And Dr. Elder was the musical anthropologist, and therefore we relied heavily on him. Outside of Dr. Elder, there were people in culture in Tobago, Mama Sardina, the Sardinas, they used to do the Kilani's group, and a number of other practicing persons. So we pulled the people who would have had the exposure and the experience and experiences in various art forms.
Good. Thanks a lot. I want to move to Josanne. I know you were pivotal to a lot of the marketing to get the money. And then I'm going to go to Binley to talk about how we dealt with the implementation. But I want to talk about the marketing first. So give us your role and tell us a bit about what were some of the early challenges there.
Thank you very much, John, and it's so wonderful to be a part of this discussion on the origins or the early beginnings of the Tobago Heritage Festival. As Stan would have mentioned, he reached out to me, and it was based on actually, he gave a little sort of forerunner. When I had started in radio at Radio Trinidad, I came up with this idea of doing this program focused on Tobago called Tobago Today. And I didn't get a lot of support for it. And it was how I met Stanley Baird. I didn't know him previous to that. And I can say that what happened during that time of creating that program. So I used to come to Tobago for a week, and I would record all of my interviews and what have you. And I had it was such a wonderful experience for me coming from Trinidad into Tobago, knowing all this sort of maybe deep-seated reservations, tensions, lack of understanding between people from Trinidad about Tobago. And I identify with that because I'm a South girl. And we have a saying that, nothing north of the Caroni Bridge that people from town understand. That has changed a lot. So I understood that kind of thinking. And so that was my baptism. So that when Stan reached out to me to ask me about this Heritage Festival and how I could help, I mean, the joke about the $1,000 is just, we could still laugh. Could you imagine an assembly, allocating $1,000? Then you're telling you they're not really serious, or they don't really think that anything is going to happen. And so I went, I just basically, I took the challenge because, and along with the team, there was Bindley and there was Lynette. And we just decided that we were going to go for broke. And I think it was really not so much about the marketing, John, but it was about the belief in what the idea, the idea is, or what the idea was and still is. And I used to have these long discussions with Stanley about the scope, if you will. So you're starting here this year, but the vision, the whole thing about the universities, the thing about bringing people from abroad so that you have educational tourism, that you just don't simply have event tourism and or cultural tourism. I was really fascinated. And of course, I already had my history of doing this Tobago Today program for Radio Trinidad, in which I really got to know every nook and cranny in Tobago. And I mean, to this day, I have to thank Stan for that, because he just made so many things possible for me to speak with people in villages, to provide transport to take me wherever I needed to go, as being in the assembly. And so there's that. So the whole thing about the marketing was really the belief system was in place.
Right.
And that's, to me, very critical. I mean, you can sell, you can spin, and you can sell something because you know how to sell. But it was really a challenge, but it was a welcome one, to sort of talk to these business people. And so, I mean, in that first year, I forget, Stanley might remember the total, I don't know, because he has probably more of an elephant brain than I do on these things. But that was,
63,000.
okay,
63,000 in
so
cash
we
and
went,
cash.
yeah. So, I mean, it's, like Roy Maraj, who was at the time with SM Jaleel. I think in that inception year, we got a trophy stand, Binley.
Yes,
I can't,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, we did.
yes, we
um,
did.
and then we had, and I said, what, we're going to beg. We literally, Binley and I walked the streets of Port of
Yeah.
Spain and knocked on the doors of all of these downtown merchants because of the events that were being curated in that inaugural year. The Tobago wedding, I remember, was the big
Yes.
one,
Yes.
and so it meant all of the palaver, all of the cloth, all of the whatever it is. I remember Johnson and Johnson when I had tackled them. Um, they weren't prepared to really give money, but what they did was they created these hampers of baskets of,
Right.
nice powder and shampoo and sanitary napkins.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was kind of, weird. Um, but so these were like hampers that would be given away as prizes. And so I mean, Bindi, of course, might remember some of it, but it really was pounding the pavement and selling
Right.
a belief system, that this island called Tobago has so much to offer by way of its rich cultural history and content.
Yeah.
And they have all these possibilities that were not just about the tradition, but also where the festival could go in terms of linkages with universities, archaeologists. So we saw all the different strands, and I was really excited to be part of that sort of brainstorming of where it might be able to go. And of course, I was responsible at the time for persuading TTT to come in. And I never forget, Linus Pitt was my producer. And yeah, so that from that inception year, we were documenting every single thing that we did, because I'm very big on documentation. So we were documenting every single thing that we did.
So I think Stanley just came in and he made a point about $63,000 was the final budget you all worked with in 1987.
It was 63 in cash and kind,
Cash and
and
kind.
that's
Okay.
right, because as Josan said, merchants gave materials and so fabric. And I must say that what we did, we presented to the assembly the budget, and we presented them with the 5 first locations for the trial year. 87 was the trial year.
Yeah. Binley, I want to segue to you. Um, Tell us which villages we worked with in 1987, 1986. Tell us which were the first set of villages that we worked with, and also some of the early challenges you would have had.
Well, thank you, John, for being a part of the program. Well, we work with villages like Moriah, Lekoto, Buku, Charlottesville, Roxborough. But the thing about it is that being a cultural enthusiast from a tender age,
Yeah.
I knew all the entertainers, dancers, as a folk dancer, Tashkilani's dance company. I'm an entertainer, promoter. So every village, I knew people in the villages. So Fitzroy Wright assisted quite a lot in getting the people from the Moriah area, Lekoto and environs. So we knew exactly what we wanted. For instance, Fitzroy's father popularized the Tobago old time wedding in a best village production. So that is why we chose Moriah, because they kept it alive. So we know that we actually knew exactly what we were looking for from the different villages. For instance, Bethel, we talk about the bouquet dance. Charlottesville, of course, where the cantata and sankeys and so on, for the harvest festival. So and then of course, knowing Lekoto in terms of the Jombi and the La Bless and so on, we knew we had to have something like folk tales and superstition from Lekoto. So we actually chose the villages that we know that were strong in their beliefs in certain things. And we were out there working night and day, the tambourine and fiddle people from Mount St. George, the Catersons. And of course, we had to be there. And of course, as Stanley said, but one thing I must say, The assembly allocated $1,000, but I, being the deputy director of tourism, we never actually got the money. It was only allocated.
That's a revelation.
So when Chris and I, when we went to the people at Mariah and so on, we had to buy little bottles of rum and talking to the community, the dancers and so on. I mean, it was a fun thing, and we got the villagers involved in that. We actually, when the programs were being put on, we said, well, look, we're going to have a bar license. We run the bar, and we're going to share the profits with the community, each community, and the festivals committee. So even though we got no actual allocation from the THA, just the promise, we were able to show a profit at the end of the year, at the end of the festival. I can't remember the figure right now, but
Right.
we were able to show a profit on that $1,000. So they had the $1,000 that we showed a profit on that. But you must thank people like Claude Superville and Mr. Beard, Policeman Beard, and I said Fitzroy Wright. He was right there with the whole production. So it was really, I'm working with the village, and that is why we were saying that, I mean, the festival committee, the festival should be used as a community tourism effort, because when you have the community involved in any tourism activity, they police themselves. And the community, once the communities can benefit, it will be sustainable. So the festival would have grown from year to year to year because of the community effort of each village.
So I want to swing back to Mr. Beard before I go to Annette, because I want to talk to Annette about the moving forward from 1987 to 1990, the coup year. So I just wanted, there's an elephant in the room. I just want for history, if Mr. Beard could tell us, because there's stories about he was the founder, there's stories about J.D. Elder was the founder. So you have different things that have been out there. Let's move it from anecdote to the truth. So, Mr. Beard, respond.
Well, John, let's be honest. The festival was conceptualized in my head as a youngster abroad. J.D. Elder was a renowned musical anthropologist. We had to depend on those the expertise of JD to make sure that what we were doing was not monkey business. And as a result, we had to rely on JD for the authenticity of whatever we presented. And therefore, that could be where the whole matter got cross-threaded.
Right.
All right? And that basically it is. But it is my idea. When I came to the assembly in 1984, and I was made Secretary for Tourism in 1986, it is then that I had to use the concept of integrated cultural, an integrated form of culture, to use it as the tool to expand our tourism offerings and products. So that's basically it. And if you were to check it, JD was in the assembly from 1980, and there was no Heritage Festival till 1987. All right? So you must appreciate where the idea came from, but we used it, we worked together. This thing is not about me or it's not about JD, it is about Tobago utilizing its resources to expand its economy and the expertise within our island.
So I want to segue now to Annette. So Annette, just respond in terms of how you came in, what was happening at that time, moving from the early 1987, where we had reached in 1990.
Very, very happy to be here. Good evening. I just want to make a little note or to say something to the question you just asked, Stanley. I began writing something about the history of the Tobago heritage because I saw it was very important. And a line says, the Tobago Heritage Festival is the brainchild of then Councillor Stanley Beard, fully supported by then Secretary of Culture in the Tobago House of Assembly, Dr. J.D. Elder. Stanley, you could correct me if I'm right or wrong or whatever. That is how I have it in my book that would come out at some time. Now, my involvement in the Tobago Heritage Festival. Sometime in 1988, I was asked, but you're on the committee, why you didn't come? I said, no one invited me. Nobody told me anything. In 1989, I received an invitation from Stanley to be a part of the Tobago Heritage Festival Committee. He then assigned me as the village coordinator. Now, the village coordinator says, you have to be in each village, you must know what is happening, you must guide. I think I took it up with a lot of zeal.
Yes.
So in 87, we had 5 villages. In 88, remember, we added to those the bouquet ball. In 89, everybody just wanted to be there. It was Groom Duke from Blackrock. The people from Castara wanted to retain hanging. You had the people from Bonaccord coming in with the games we used to play. And every year, we kept adding villages and villages and villages. And it was so exciting because, as somebody said, you said, John, everybody wanted to be there. I want to say that the festival was not without its little problems or challenges. You mentioned 1990 when there was the coup.
Yeah.
Carlton Calendar, the deceased, my good pal, and I had just returned from Lake where we ensured everything was being put in place. When I got to my house, Carlton said, I find you walking slow. I said, me ain't going back up there, I am tired. That's just what I said. By the time I got out of the car, my husband kept calling back Carlton. There's a coup, no heritage tonight. And that's how we learned of the coup in. So there was no heritage, and a number of the shows.
Well, the heritage did start, but the problem was when we all got there, because I had picked up Udin Joel. And when she said what she saw on the TV, I told her it was a play. That can't be serious. And we continued to Lekoto. But the one thing that was certain was that there was no police. No police turned up, nobody turned up. And that's when we realized everybody was speculating at that time. We didn't have these cell phones like how we have them now. So that was really a funny kind of night. I don't know. I think it started, but it had to stop. I don't think it continued.
No, it didn't. I don't think it did. It didn't.
Yeah. I can't remember what. Yeah, go ahead.
I am going to move a little further than 1990 because I want to show that we, that time I called myself we because I was a real heritage lady. We were not without our little problems and challenges. We used to have real exciting festival launches. One year we decided, well, we are going to have an island pilgrimage. Buses, trucks, open back vehicles, everybody. We went to the windward side. We had dancers join you at Lansome, who joined us in Bloody Bay, who joined us in so and so. However, that evening when I got home, tired like what, a phone call came. There has been an accident and somebody's dead. Well, straight up to the hospital we went. When I got there, I got to recognize that Esther Agard from the Pembroke group had died. And then one other person was hospitalized. She was Michelle Leacock. God bless their souls. They were dancers from Pembroke. And their bus overturned on the rock to palliative room. So then we had coup. We had that in 1993. One of the bleachers at Lake Oto is always featuring it. One of the bleachers broke down. Nobody died, thank the Lord. But 1 or 2 persons were seriously injured. As a matter of fact, there's a lady up to now she doesn't want to hear the word about that thing at Lake at all, because she was maybe the most seriously injured, but she's alive and well, but she doesn't want to hear heritage at all. So we had some wonderful times with heritage, bringing in every year another village and another event. And I must say, one event that I always liked was the courtship code. When we went down to Culloden, met with Crusoe Kid, or Ilbacus and his brothers, and Gracie Phillips and we decided we would do the courtship codes that would come before the wedding. We went in the bush, and they got the cabbage bark tree. They cut the tree so that we could come to set up the place as it used to and as it should be. They gave me yaba to eat, and I really did not want to eat it. So whenever they're not looking on my side, I was spitting out. But it was really, those days were really beautiful times. I enjoyed sitting at the feet of people like Mr. James Murray, Boyo James, that's Henry James' brother, Lefroy Moses, and people like those who helped me to understand what our heritage really was.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. I mean, you took up about three of my other questions, but that's okay. I'm glad that you went down there. I want to go back to Binley. Binley, in the early days, the Heritage Festival, and maybe Stanley, you could chime in too. Was it about the villages, about us celebrating our heritage in Tobago, or was it tourism centric, or was it a mix? What exactly was it?
Yeah, it was tourism centric in that we think that the main cultural tourism would have been the main focus to really have the villages cultural tourism in the communities, so that we always felt that the main people in the communities have been left out of the tourist industry, in that they wouldn't have nice big guest houses and in apartments and so on, but they sort of bed and breakfast sort of situation. You see how Castara is really flourishing now? That might have been the birth of what Castara is now. Because we all always felt that the main cultural tourism in the communities will benefit the communities, and the communities will get benefits from the tourism industry. Also, we felt that if you have a strong cultural tourism program, you'd be able to actually market this to the countries that really occupied Tobago in colonial past. For instance, we look at the Dutch, the British, the Dutch, the British, the French.
Yeah.
We felt that if we could market, and that this was one of some of the ideas that Stanley had, in that those persons would have been able to come down from the universities and do some tuition at the hotel school, where they would be able to get grades, and they would have been able to partake in the cultural activities. One of the things that we wanted to do is to have, these university students being a part of the program. For instance, we wrote the community development persons at the British High Commission, and we got pictures of the costumes of the soldiers and the sailors of different eras. So it would have been such a grand idea that if those persons coming down from England would have been able to play as and parade on the streets as a sailor or a soldier, as the case may be, that would have been something that would have been able to sort of spread, to have more universities coming to Tobago to enjoy the festivals.
Yeah, Stanley, you want to chime in?
Yeah, it was definitely a mix of both tourism and culture, because what had happened is that there was no real attempt. Now, we weren't looking at culture as a potential mechanism or tool, call it what you want, to help diversify the economy. And the problem here is that the rest of the Caribbean was chasing after sun, sand, and sea. We had to come up with a little difference. And the difference that we offered is our rich cultural heritage. And therefore, it was easy. It would have been easy. And I will tell you what it led to. Binley spoke about the British. But then we moved on into the tourism department to twin ourselves with the Scarborough, England, Scarborough, Ontario, and there's Scarborough in Maine. The Scarborough, England has a festival called the Scarborough Fayre, which is the spelling of fair in Old English. We said we could develop a triennial, right, a program where we support the English Fayre, they support our Scarborough Fair, and we also support the Ontario Scarborough Fair. If you remember, the tune done by Simon and Garfunkel says, "Are you going to the Scarborough Fair?" So you see how in tourism, we started to use the linkages of language, of music, etc., to assist us in marketing this island. It has never been pursued. Binley will tell you we have had meetings with the Lord Mayor of Scarborough, Yorkshire, England. And I did geography and geology. And I'm telling you, John, if you were to Google Scarborough in Yorkshire, England, you will see the landscape being exactly as Scarborough, Tobago. There is a military fortification, just as Fort King George, sitting there. You come down the Bacolet Ridge, and then you land up on a very large expanse of coastline, which runs like from Scarborough down to Lambo. Google Scarborough, Yorkshire, England, and see the similarities. And you see, in tourism, you needed to know where your tourist or set up a location that would be your headquarters to actually market this island from. We also did it in trying to save BWIA, the sale of BWIA, because BWIA served Tobago at the time with flights from London, Frankfurt, and Stockholm. So we are trying to use and to save our national carrier from extinction.
Right.
Mr. Arnold, Mr. Arnold, John.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I add something here?
Yes, add.
I remember I was involved in something with the name of places called Plymouth in relation to England. As a matter of fact, I think it was some assembly thing. I did not go as I was supposed to go, but there was some involvement with places called Plymouth over the world, in Plymouth in England. And I also want to add that while Eddie Hernandez was at the museum, people came 2 to 3 years from the Trinity College to do studies here with us to get credits for there. I remember that happening.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, Josanne, I want to go to you now, but I also would ask Billy to chime in. In the area of infrastructure, right? That very big area of staging and lighting and sound and all the other things, costuming and so on. How we all manage in those first 2-3 years?
Well, I think I'd have to throw to Binley on that. I mean, because I was backup chorus, if you will. So I'll throw to Binley, but I'd like to come back and say something, because I think that really the Tobago crew, or the posse in Tobago, was really all the time. I mean, for us, it was like, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to find the resources to support what it is that they need? Yes? So I'll throw to Binley.
Binley, when you are saying, talk about suppliers. Did Tobago have the suppliers? Did we have to go Trinidad? You know, that whole thing. Go ahead.
Well, what Josanne said is that, I mean, to put the show together, you know, I said I had some experiences in running shows, you know, at Tropical, Caribana, and Bishop's High School, and Queen's Hall, and San Fernando. So I got assistance from Fitzroy Wright. You know, he was right there with us. And it was challenging, but I mean, it was doable. because having had the experience, as a dancer, as a singer, whatever, you know the layout of the stage, you know what items to put on first, second, and third. So I had a good team with me, so we were able to sort of put things together and make it exciting. Because we also always felt that a show must leave something with everyone who's leaving to want to come again. And we also had sort of critique after the show to see where we went wrong and how we can improve. And of course, Josanne and Lynette they were quite hands-on in getting our costumes and all that sort of thing. So we had and of course Eddie Hernandez assisted again,
yes,
also
very critical
with the stagecraft, right? Of course, we have to give him credit for coming up with the logo. She becomes more beautiful. That logo, like I said, put persons figure. Why isn't she having a child up to now? But
Yeah.
but the concept was very, 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 very interesting. With the crows in the hair, the Amerindian outlook, and I think that we should be doing much more to really do something with our heritage. I might be looking at something in the future now, because when Stanley and I went and to talk with Peter Minshall in 1987 at 87 Stanley or 88? 87.
88.
88. At Richmond House, and we told
That's right.
Peter Minshall about the Laja Bless and the Sukunya and the Dwen and the
he went crazy.
He said, oh my God, the mass. So we thought, people have been asking for second carnival in Tobago. That's your second carnival in Tobago. The folklore and superstition. You have the parade of the military of that era, the Amerindians, we have the sailors, we have the pirates, we have the military. That's your second carnival, Heritage Fest. So we don't want to call it a carnival, but a festival of that nature.
Right, we coming forward. Excellent idea.
Yeah, a festival of that nature, outside of the normal Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, would be a seller to the entire Caribbean.
So you went down to a question I was going to ask later on down in the end. But I'm going back. Josanne, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, as I said, it was really been me and the team in Tobago, but we were really multitasking. And I recall that inaugural year in Lake Oto. And I don't know, I know that Stanley wasn't there. I don't know if Benny was there, but my God, we had filmed some woman that had been identified as the sort of font of knowledge in Lake Oto. And I never forget when we went there with the crew. So, this is how we're multitasking, John. We're planning, we're talking through budget, money, what we have for prize, what we have for what this village might need for props or what have you. Then we all going off in different directions. And so one of the directions I was going off in was documentation. And I went with Linus Pitt, and I think it was Benedict Joseph, the cameraman. And all I know is that we went up this steep kind of place in Lake Oto to talk with this woman. And I got one buff in my tail because I didn't know that I had to walk backwards into the woman's house. I hadn't been schooled. I hadn't been given the protocol. But we recorded this amazing interview with her about the whole village and all of this superstition and what people call superstition. So we ran so late with doing this interview that it was time for the setting up for the Tales in the Lake Oto Park there. My God, and you think about it, must have really had Jumbie at work that night, because the sound wouldn't work, the flambeaux kept outing. Then at one point it was so pitch black, like the generator went. And I have to say, that was an experience. And I say, well, wait now, all this thing this woman tell me earlier on in the day, this must be some real Jumbie making ruction here tonight, that they didn't want this thing to take place. But it was, it was all of those things taking place. And when we were done, because Lynette and myself, it was the Crown Reef, wasn't it, Binley, at the time? The Crown Reef Hotel. Right. So we were put up at the Crown Reef Hotel, which was owned by the government. And so, you know, was whatever deal that was. And we have to come back now. And as Binley was saying, you know, you're post-morteming what's going on because, you know, you didn't have this, you didn't have that, or this didn't go right, or this is what's going on tomorrow. It was just such an amazing experience. The other thing I want to really quip in here for us to just signpost was a lot of things came out of Heritage, some of which I wasn't part of, but there's some other things that I was a part of, and they were particularly the conversations with some of the universities and some of the people interested in culture and society and anthropology and those kinds of things. And we went, so we had an exchange with, I think it was Martinique or Guadeloupe. We had gone with a Martinique. We actually were guests of the people in Atlanta. And you remember that trip, Stan? I don't know if Binley, I don't know if you were on that trip.
No,
and that was pretty amazing because they rolled out a real welcome carpet and laid it on to, you know, going to Morehouse College, going to the Martin Luther King Chapel, all of those things, going to the meeting the general manager of the Atlanta airport, which had just had a remake, and they were focusing art and culture as inherent and integral to the design of the airport, so that there would be these exhibitions and performances, and we had a sense of that as well. So all of these are, that's, you know, the linkage with tourism and the linkage with economic development. Those are some of the things that I could bear witness to in terms of coming out of my experience with that experiment, which has now become you know, well, it's not an experiment, but the early days of the Tobago Heritage Festival.
So I must say here that maybe well in the 90s, the early 90s, we must recognize the NCC. I think Alfred Aguitor was the person, and Mr. Aguitor was in charge. He was the chairman, and they loaned us bleachers, they loaned us stage and lighting equipment and different things. They were very, very helpful. When we went to Trinidad and we bought the logs of cloth and all these things, they would put it in their office. They would save everything first, transport us down to the airport so that, you know, not the airport, down to the boat.
To the boat.
They were very, very, very helpful. They are the first persons who allowed us to get bleachers and stuff like that for the shows.
Yeah, that's very true. Good info. Stanley, go ahead.
Yeah, I need just to make three little inputs. The first one is the whole question of the first 3 years. We used to have to take down the stages after the night's performance and take them to the next location for the next day. Yeah. It was something else that we had to do. Fitzroy Wright and the staff at tourism, I'm telling you, each night when it was done, we actually had to break the stages down and take them to the next location for the next opportunity. The other thing I just want to mention is the whole question. Josanne mentioned Atlanta, yes, but we also had an interface with the New Orleans Jazz Commission. Yeah. And the New Orleans Jazz Commission, they have 2 stages every year. One is their New Orleans Jazz, and the second is what they call the international stage. We had discussions with them, I think it was in 2000, and what they said, they would give Trinidad and Tobago the use of the international stage. It was 1999 we met with them, and they said that they will give Trinidad and Tobago the use of the international stage in 2001. The problem with that, John, is that we in the assembly lost the election, and there was no follow-up to the work that we did to get Trinidad and Tobago to appear on the international stage for the duration of the festival. And what they do is they actually focus on fashion, food, the dance, and other performing arts. It was an opportunity we saw in promoting the Heritage Festival and the culture of Tobago, but getting in on the international ground floor of getting visitors to visit us and showcasing what Tobago and Trinidad, by extension, what we are about. That is the thing that hurts me today, that we're not seeing the use, the whole integrated form of cultural tourism is not being used to further the economy and expand the economy of this island.
I want to talk about the performers, about the people in the communities, because I'm going back to this thing about this vibe, this virus. And I remember myself, Dr. Mark, Carlton, Annette, this, when we were moving, it was a real virus that had taken over Tobago. I really want to talk about that in the early days, how that grew, because that became a real, people were just moving with it as a wave. So let me get Binley first, then Annette, and then Josanne, and then Stanley.
As I said, John, I mean, that the persons really, gravitated, to the shows because they were part of it. Because when you talk about the old time wedding in Mariah, I mean, the age groups, you have the older people like the Carrington people, and we have the youngsters. They were all a part of the little bridesmaid, and so it's a community thing that really brought people together. Like for instance, we have Belen Belgarden. I mean, the elderly people dancing, Elvira Job, and those youngsters, Sonny Byron, and those old people, plus the youths. So I mean, culture, is a melting pot of but togetherness. The old and the new, I mean, the young and the old all participate in having fun because I mean, when we talk about the trumpet and fiddle music, when you hear those fellas from Mount St. George, I mean you have to move, and even if you cannot dance a reel and jig, you dance it something because you couldn't. I mean, you see the beat that you would hear with the drums and the cut. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to see. I'm having goosebumps right now. So I mean, as I said, our music is so captivating in that when you hear it, you have to move to the tambourine and fiddle and the drums, the African drums. So I mean, it's a force that we must be able to sort of harness in the right way, so that we can really have more love in the community.
Annette, your reflection.
In most of our, well, nearly all the villages wanted to be a part of this thing that they're calling the heritage. So they were becoming jealous of each other. And everybody came with an idea. So there's a point now you have to choose because you could not bring all the villages. So you have to choose them according to locations and what the quality of their stuff was. You sort of chose them according to that. And I mean, it's like, I remember, this is just a little joke. I remember Mrs. Groom Duke. Blackrock was not in as yet. Those days there used to be upstairs bodies, that is the tourism place,
Yeah.
upstairs bodies. We were in the office and this person came up the steps. Well, we Blackrock want to be in the thing, because we have the thing and we have this the thing. We want to have the hanging that is saying. I said, you are just about half an hour late because Castara just came in here with that. By the following morning, there was Miss Gumdruk again. We wanted to do the boat christening. We had to take them because it was, and that's how people used to be coming with their different ideas to get in. Everybody wanted to be a part. And I must say, a number of our young people have been involved. And it's just what we teach them is what they would do. So if we go off, is that we didn't teach them what they should do. But a number of our young people have always been interested in that aspect. I must say that. I go to Charlottesville, and wherever we rehearse is full of people. Young, little ones are on the ground, everybody. You go to a number of villages and you have that. But John, you know something I wanted to mention? I might be out of time and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I wanted us to talk about those people who through the years would have been in charge of the Heritage Festival. That's one. And two, I want to talk about sponsorship.
Let's go ahead with it.
Stanley Beard, Norris Jordan, John Arnold, Annette Alfred, Verlin, Bob Lewis, Roy Titus, Garnet Peters, Winfield Comina, Eric Powder, Wendell Berkeley, George Leacock. I just ran through the names. Lucille Percy, Fitzroy Wright, a key figure. I have an asterisk next to his name. Toby James, Carlton Calendar, outstanding. Edward Hernandez, Victoria Pat Mitchell, Eastland Mackenzie, Earl Beach, Lucille Percy, Grace Dennis, Billy Benjamin, production manager, Gloria Kojo, Cecil Beckles, Henry James, Zelma Covey. You didn't joke, there are others, but I listed those names because it is important for what happened to be the growth of the festival. No, how we could not have a festival in the 90s without sponsorship. And they'll be the sponsors, some of them behave just like the village people. They actually came begging to be a part of to help to sponsor or to make donations. And when I hear people telling me nowadays, I'm not singing it, but people are telling me about 5 sponsors, and I don't know. Air Canada, Arnos Vale, Amar, Amoko, BWA, Cannings, Tatil, Grafton Beach, Tobago Marketing, Bank of Commerce, Scotia Bank, SM Jalil, National Flour Mills, Neil and Massey, Wimpy Caribbean, Huggins Tobago Limited, Riyadh Caribbean Butlers, Royal Bank, Port Authority, Jimmy Abu, TSCT, Republic Bank, Unit Trust, TT Post, NLCB, VAT 19, Angostura Carry, First Citizens, Flavor Right, TCL, Trinidad Cement Limited, Whitco, BPTT, York Structures, Mount Irving Bay Hotel, Digicel, Turtle Beach Hotel, Penta Paints, IT McLeod, TNT Methanol Company Limited. Without them, we could have been nowhere on many times. And they did. Many of them wanted to be a part of the activity. Many of them wanted to be a part. It's like they owned this village and they knew their people by names, by first names, and so on. We must remember them when we are talking about the festival.
It's very true.
Definitely. I know it takes us out of the earlies. It takes us way down the growth and metamorphosis. But I want to go back. Stanley, just one thing to clear up. In the earlies, from a policy or from a guideline or whatever was created, was the idea to move these events around, or was the idea to have villages being pegged? Because I remember when I came on in the 90s, that was a discussion. Tobago Old Time Wedding, why can't it be done by another village? Why did it have to be pegged here? So in the earlies, what was the early thinking there?
The early thinking, John, was that, listen, a community would actually be noted for a particular performance.
Okay.
Because we felt that there was sufficient history and cultural art forms for each village to have. And this is why I'm going to tell you that was the thinking in the beginning. It manifested itself again in 97 when we saw the Blue Food Festival land up in Lansony, because each village was going to have an economic activity developed along its heritage and cultural background to be a sustaining event, and that there would be a following each year or each time that activity would be enacted. And each village, Castara was supposed to be of feathers and fish in terms of that sort of thing. We also sat at and the village of Hope. We worked with the Panyard in Hope towards developing an activity that would see the Hope people sit and perfect what they were doing. what we could then do, as Annette was saying, some years we have the activity on, but we interchange not the productions, but the schedule. So this year, 3 stay in, 4 come out, to allow 4 to come in and 3 stay. So that's basically what I want to say, and this is piggybacks on what was said earlier, and Josanne can correct me. When we sat down with Fernandez or Angostura, I can't remember which one, and this is in the early, they were willing to fund a real wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were looking at from the Department of Tourism, you see, just as how you have game shows on the US television circuits, we have as the prize in terms, and now you have weddings. Weddings, that is a big market in tourism. That you, if you apply to get a sponsored wedding, as in the styling of the Tobago Heritage Wedding, you could enter your name anywhere in the world. And it would mean that I think it was Nikki Innes,
Nikki
Josanne.
Innes. It was Nikki Innes.
Nikki Innes, who said they will sponsor that wedding. Think of the kind of pull that gets, because you have people from Australia, New Zealand, wherever they come from, can apply to be the wedding being sponsored by Nikki Innes' company. So the thinking was there. We had things down pat, but I'm going to tell you, John, there were individuals, there were doubts even in the Tobago House of Assembly that we should do anything called Heritage Festival. I remember, Josanne, you remember the flack we got from a lady in one of those hotels in Trinidad asking, why is the woman pregnant?
Yeah.
Is it to allow young men to impregnate young Tobago girls? Those are the kinds of things we had to fight against. But we did. And I'm happy to say we won out in the end.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Baird. I know we're coming down to the close. Josanne, I have a very curious question here, especially for the young persons listening to us. We have TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We have so many modes of communication now. During the earlies, just tell us, what were those modes, or the media that we had to use, or the media, that we had to communicate about what we wanted first to get the buy-in and also to sell the festival?
Well, I think it was on different levels. I think we did a really good job of, and that was the power of our personalities and connections. We were able to get a lot of traction in the media. Now, at that time, of course, we didn't have traditional media. We didn't have as many radio stations. And of course, at the time, we may just have had TTT. I don't think we had birthed TV6s yet. So we were just essentially dealing with TTT. And I can say that the successive program directors and the brass at TTT were really very supportive. And it would be a shame just for me to just throw my mind back to think that one of the things that we did was that we did a lot of documentation. It wasn't just the actual events. We almost the behind the scenes kind of thing. And a lot of, we got a lot of traction from TTT. We had little vignettes. The guys at TTT, Linus Pitt and that whole crew, Ogis, they were all, because it was really an eye-opening experience, even though you live in Trinidad and Tobago, coming so, interfacing so closely and intimately with the culture of the island was really a blue mind experience for the crews that worked with me over those 2 or 3 years. The other thing I would say comes back to Bidney's point. There was so much participation. There was such that flow between community leaders and people in the community. and what we were trying to accomplish with the festival. And I think that in itself, I guess that is what you call street marketing in the modern sense. So that I think that actually played a tremendous part in terms of the ownership, in terms of people in Tobago feeling a sense of ownership of the process. And I think we really we made some breakthroughs in terms of national media. So when we could see on Panorama, or we could see on particular programs, the Tobago Heritage Festival or interviews with someone, we got a lot of good press. I know I have quite a few newspaper articles tackling one of those topics, which is why the pregnant woman, for example. So I think we had a lot of we had a lot of profile in terms of the national media, and we had a very strong, which I think is to the credit of the people in Tobago. We had a very strong connection with the community and the festival, really feeling a part of it. Not like somebody in the assembly has decreed that this is what it's going to be and it's going to be staged.
Allow me to say this.
Go ahead, Stanley.
And Binley and all, we know politics had been in everything. And what we were able to do in 1987 is to keep politics out of the Heritage Festival.
Sure.
And what it did, it was an inclusive story for the village people. You remember the persons for the Miss Heritage competition could have been from ages 1 to 92.
Yes.
That's right. Remember that.
Yeah,
and we did it as for the purpose of bringing everybody in the villages into the productions that we do. I'm going to shut up by asking if any of you remember the opening night show where we had goats cross the stage to market Buku Goat Festival.
Of course I remember.
And the opening night show, what we said, the opening night show ought to be a variety show, bringing any activity plus the cultural activity on the stage. Who remembers the closing night show? Those goats came back on the stage, but they had top hats, waistcoats, and socks. Top hat, waistcoats, and socks is what those goats crossed the stage with because of the impact of the festival on the goats.
Who remembers when the president of the country, give me the name, I'm not remembering it, when the president sat by the side of a table with his enamel cup, drinking his chocolate tea from the wake.
Yes,
Do you remember that?
Yes.
No, there are loads of stories. Of stories. But folks, there's no way with a amalgamation of folks like you all today, a collection of folks like you all today, knowledge bearers, we can go on for hours on this road and on this discussion. What I will do, I will take what Stanley said as his closing. I will take what Annette said as a closer. And I will now ask Josanne to give a closer, and then Billy, and then we'll close the program.
You didn't tell me that was my closer, so I'm still waiting. I have mine waiting.
Okay, all right. So go ahead, Josanne.
Because this is really focusing on the early years, I really want to say that I feel really, as somebody who believes in our culture and our promise and Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean society, sometimes you take a lot of licks, but I think that it was worth every ounce of effort. I think what I recall and what I carry with me is the tremendous love and the tremendous desire to just do something to uplift the island of Tobago through celebrating it in its diversity. And that is an unfinished project, and I'm just very happy that Tobagonians, given our tensions at times and so, allowed me, this little Trini girl from San Fernando, to be a part of it. And that's largely through Stanley and the work that I had been doing before in Tobago. So I get my honorary Tobago papers. And I would want to wish and hope that we could continue to maybe revisit the Heritage Festival as it is now, and probably look at those things that we may have left along the way that still hold tremendous promise, particularly when it allows us to go into other realms other than just the performance realm. So thank you, John, and for the rest of
Thank
you
you very much,
having me.
Josanne. Binley?
I would like to say that in traveling, throughout, many parts of the world, I always refer to Trinidad and Tobago as the culture capital of the world. But I think we have to be more mindful of what we do with our culture, because we should be monetizing our culture, because it's a revenue stream that is sitting, waiting there, because we have the chutney, we have the soca, we have the limbo, the calypso, the steel band. Why don't we use the entertainment industry as a revenue stream? We ought to do something to help our artists and artisans to ensure that our culture stays alive and it's worldwide, worldwide.
I have to take back my word, and I'll have to give Georgia a closer too. And then no closer.
I believe in what Josanne said in the second part of our statement. Let us go back to the heritage. And those things that we might have dropped by the wayside, let us pick them up and go with them. But Edgar Davidson told me in my sleep one day, Annette, whatever you do for the heritage, remember to be authentic. And I am begging for us to continue with authenticity. Thank you.
All right, George, Stanley, let's get your closer.
It's very easy, John. I am happy we have had this time together in looking at where we have come from. My biggest wish before I depart this life is to see that all of Tobago, and not some of Tobago, ensures that the lady who is pregnant and has been pregnant for 34 years remains pregnant, but we, the people, ensure that she continues to grow beautiful for the benefit of all future Tobagonian or the future Tobagonian generations. We have a beautiful opportunity to make this work for us economically, socially, culturally. And there is potential, there's endless potential that we can, if we work together and not singly, but collectively, towards ensuring that she becomes more beautiful. Thank you for this opportunity.
I'd like to thank our panelists, Mr. George Stanley Baird, Mrs. Annette Alfred, Mr. Binley Benjamin, and Ms. Josanne Leonard for a wonderful session this evening. It was engaging, entertaining, and certainly educational. I'd also like to thank the persons working tediously with us in the background, those persons such as Antonia, Kimmy, Anjana, and Mark. I'd also like to thank the board of directors of the TFCL and the executive management team and staff. I'd like to thank all our sponsors who made it possible to be associated with the Tobago Heritage Festival 2021. And I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in to the Tobago Festival's